What's up, YouTube and NBA fans? I have a really special guest here today. I'm super excited about this one because I have AlexHoops with me today to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder in this episode of the Timeline series. I actually was not aware that Alex was an OKC fan. So when I got that information, I'm like, yeah, definitely need him as the guest in today's episode to talk about, the options at the number 2 pick, the future of the franchise, and so much more. I'm going to give Alex the floor. I'm sure you probably already know who he is. He's, only the biggest NBA YouTuber on the platform right now. But, Alex, take it away.
Yeah, a lot of people actually don't know that I'm an OKC fan. I'm not typically very vocal about it because, if you watch my videos, I take a very matter of fact, kind of analytical and relatively unbiased approach to my content. So I don't really like to talk too much about who I am and am not a fan of. So, but yeah, I've been an OKC Thunder fan for as long as I've been a basketball fan. Been there through the highs and lows, even though, the team as a whole is pretty young relative to most franchises. I mean,
Sure.
Didn't become a franchise until they relocated from Seattle. But yeah, it's been an interesting process going from a fan of a team that, came to Oklahoma and then was instantly good because they had Kevin Durant and they got Russell Westbrook and, all of a sudden they were this really, really good team. And then, years and years and years of playoff success. And then we could kind of see the writing on the wall that things were slowly coming to an end with Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant leaving, Russell Westbrook kind of showing signs of, after that 2017 MVP season, showing signs that he may not be quite the level that he was in 2017 for much longer. The Paul George years were interesting and definitely worth a shot, but unfortunately that was pretty short-lived. And then we got Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then all of a sudden we're in the playoffs again, which was a pleasant surprise. I think a lot of people, we went into that season expected to be a lottery team, and all of a sudden we almost knocked the Rockets out of the playoffs, and that was great. But it's been nice the past 2 years, I will say, just having no, I guess, dog in the fight. I don't really have much skin in the game right now as far as teams I'm rooting for. Obviously, throughout the season, I pick up teams that I like, and I'm like, oh, I'll root for this team tonight, or I'll root for this team in the playoffs. But for the most part, it's just been whoever wins, whatever. It has no impact on me because OKC is losing no matter what. So I've enjoyed the process, quote unquote, so far.
That's good to hear, because I'm also happy you pointed out the fact that this rebuild has really only been going on for 2 years. And that's something I've seen a lot of Oklahoma City fans point out, because, the team has been unfairly kind of labeled as the poster boy for tanking in the past few seasons. And it's definitely not fair. The fan base has pushed back on that reputation because this rebuild has only started till recently. Like you mentioned, they had Chris Paul a few seasons ago and literally almost knocked the Rockets out of the playoffs in 2020. So the Thunder should get more credit, in my opinion, because even for as bad as they have been under the 2 tanking years, if you kind of look at the stats and look at some of the games, they are a little more competitive than, the mainstream likes to give them credit for, and just label them worst team in the league, this, that, and the third.
Right.
You're not going to get a bunch of wins. That Al Horford year was solid. They probably could have gotten more wins had he played things out a bit more. Shai ends up getting hurt at the end of the year. A lot of people like to say they just pulled him, but Thunder fans know he did not play for Team Canada that summer, so he was obviously hurt. And then injuries this year for him as well. So, I think Oklahoma City has the capability to be a much better team going into next season than, maybe some casual observers' first thoughts when it comes to them. And this number 2 overall pick is going to do, a lot to help, in becoming more competitive, whether they want to or not, with the type of talent they should be able to select number 2 overall. But I kind of want to slowly start to get into your thoughts on their current roster before we even pivot to the draft stuff, because I do want to contextualize what type of players this second overall pick will actually be going to play with in Oklahoma City. That conversation starts with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He, nicknamed the timeline. He's kind of the poster boy for this series because I think everything is on his shoulders when it comes to OKC's competitive timeline. When they start to push the chips in and consolidate, will be, based around Shai and when he wants to contend and, how much he's ascending. So I'd just like to get your thoughts on SGA, as a, kind of sub all-star level, fringe all-star player. Like, what do you think his ceiling is?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I love, and people don't really talk about this enough, he's got a very reasonable contract for the level of player that he is. 23 years old. He's been in all-star conversations for the past 2 years, even though he hasn't gotten a selection yet. He's definitely shown that ability. And we've got him on pretty much a $30 million contract. That contract is backloaded, so obviously it's going to get bigger and bigger every year, but that kicks in next year for about $30 million. And I think that's totally reasonable. 23-year-old fringe all-star, literally nowhere to go but up. And people forget that, after the all-star break, he came back and he was top 5 in scoring for like a month out of the all-star break. Yeah. He's averaging something like 30 points per game post all-star break, looking absolutely incredible. His three-point shooting regressed this year, which, is a little concerning, but prior to this year, he was like a 37% three-point shooter for his career prior to this season. So I'm not too worried about that. This season feels like more of a fluke from three than the last 3 seasons. I think we have a bigger sample size to draw from there. So I'm not too worried about that. He just keeps getting better and better. And I don't know how high that ceiling goes because he is 23. I guess at 23, you can start to question, is this player as good as he's going to get? Which is a question a lot of people ask with Shai. But, if 25, 5, and 6 is as good as you're going to get, I'd say that's pretty dang good.
Yeah, absolutely. And SGA at the max, like, I totally agree. That's a very reasonable contract for him. With what he's shown, like his ability to just provide some rim pressure, like, and even not being the greatest of shooters, like the fact that he can still get to the rim as consistently as he does is absurd. So yeah, that's another thing to focus on from like a roster standpoint, spacing things out for him, because his play can get better just by improving the quality of the players around him, making it a little easier for him to get to his spot. So I'm glad.
Yeah, he's a 66. He's a 66% shooter at the rim this season, and he's doing that with literally the worst spacing in the NBA. Like when you open that spacing up, and he's able to carve up defenses a little bit better with more spacing inside the arc. He's gonna be one of the best. He already is one of the best guard finishers in the league. A year from now, 2 years from now, when we get better spacing around him, he could potentially end up being the best guard finisher in the league. I mean, we don't know yet.
Very true. Some tough competition in Ja Morant, but I think SGA.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's fit to be right up there with him, in my opinion. The other key character on the roster is last year's rookie Josh Giddey. Just interested in hearing your thoughts on him. Probably should have been first team all rookie, had a phenomenal rookie season, pretty much won like every rookie of the month that he was available for. So, a lot of people are obviously saying he should have been first team all rookie instead of second team, but splitting hairs a little bit, but ultimately a really great rookie year from Josh Giddey. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I see a lot of discourse surrounding Josh Giddey because this kid was one of the youngest. He might have been the youngest player in the draft. I can't remember. No, that was Jonathan Kuminga. But Josh Giddey was, I believe, the second or top 5 youngest rookies in the draft. One of the youngest players in the NBA this year, 19 years old. I don't understand why people are so quick right now to be writing off his upside as a player. People are talking about his scoring, like oh, his scoring game is non-existent right now. He'll never be a good scorer. He's going to be a glorified Ricky Rubio. Ben Simmons with worse scoring ability. I don't really get that. I don't understand how you can watch a 19-year-old playing with the team that he's playing with. No one's I'm not gonna sit here and try to tell you that OKC has this incredible roster. And Josh Giddey with a better team around him probably looks like a much better player than he already does. 12 points per game, 8 rebounds. The fact that he was one of the best rookie rebounders in the entire NBA at 6'8" as a point guard, that's really scary. He's going to be a really, really good rebounder. And I think and then his playmaking alone make him a really, really exciting player. And if he can even add, and I'm not saying he needs to become this 20-point per game scorer with crazy ball handling ability and, step backs and hezzy tween, crazy layup package, anything like that. But if he can just become a decent 3-point shooter or, a decent finisher, he's going to be a really, really scary player. I mean, you're talking about a guy who already is putting up, 12 and a half points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. If he can become a guy who's like 15, 8, and 8, that's a really, really productive starting level point guard in the NBA. And, in certain seasons, you can make an argument that that's borderline all-star level. So I'm not worried about him at all. I don't know where the concern comes from, because as a Thunder fan right now, we don't have the, I guess, the privilege of being concerned right now, because we are so early in this rebuild. We're not in any position right now to be looking at any of our rookies, anyone under the age of 22, and saying, oh, they're not where we want them to be yet. It's guys, there is plenty of time. These guys are like kids relative to, the average of the fan base. We've got plenty of time. Don't rush things. Be patient with these guys. And especially, be patient with Josh Giddey, because he's shown us enough that he's earned himself a little bit of a leash here.
That patience has been a recurring theme that I've heard, spelled by Thunder fans. Just patience and trust in Sam Presti. And, that makes sense. Sam Presti is a guy with a phenomenal draft record since, OKC, moving over to Oklahoma, moving from Seattle. Sam Presti's pretty much been the guy in charge for the entirety of this franchise. He's drafted, Kevin Durant. That was a no-brainer pick. So,
right.
Up to you how much credit you want to give him for that one. Russell Westbrook, that one was not a no-brainer. And, for as many haters and detractors as Russ has, to be able to find him where he was and for him to have had the career he did, that was a great developmental story, great draft story, and just, amazing story on Russ's part for turning into the player he's become, finding James Harden in the top 5 as well. Those are 3 MVPs right there. Most GMs never draft that, and he pretty much had those in 3 straight drafts or something like that. Just right. Other guys on the fringe in the tier, he brought in Serge Ibaka, didn't draft Victor Oladipo, but bringing him in as a trade piece on a real low value deal. He's done some good things. And then obviously Josh Giddey with the 6th pick last year. So it makes sense why Oklahoma City Thunder fans have built in a lot of trust in Sam Presti. I think there would have probably been a lot more concern with this rebuild if there was let's say the Kings former GM, Vlade, let's say he was in charge of this. There probably would have been a ton of concern, just transitioning away from that Westbrook era and okay, now we're just going to, stack a bunch of draft picks and try and figure this thing out. But the fact that Sam Presti was the guy at the head of this thing, I think that allowed a lot of fans to be okay, this guy knows what he's doing. We trust he's going to draft, right? The players seem to believe in the vision that he's had. SGA has said, he believes in Sam Presti. He believes he has a plan for this team, and he's going to get them on a competitive track. And, that has allowed a level of calm inside the fan base that's it's a total contrast to outside the fan base because everyone's like, oh, when will OKC stop tanking? And, they're a black scar against the league. And inside the fan base, it's just this calm, like, Presti's got us. We're going to be competing for playoff spots and titles within the next 5 to 10 years. We're not tripping about this. Can you kind of speak to that calming effect that Presti's had over the fan base?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is another thing that it's not necessarily with the Thunder fan base, because the Thunder fan base seems to get it, but more so with the NBA fan base as a whole. Is I always see the joke, Presti's going to trade the second overall pick for a bunch of future first round picks.
Yeah.
He's going to trade Shea for a bunch of future first round picks, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, they always talk about how the goal is for Sam Presti to get these picks and doesn't actually turn it into a competent roster. I'm like, one, going back to what I said earlier, we're very early in our rebuild. We don't have the ability to be trying to consolidate just yet. Two, you look at an example. It's funny that you mentioned Vlade Divac. If you Sacramento Kings, everything that they've done has been very, very rushed. They don't take they haven't taken their time with their rebuild. With the whole drafting Marvin Bagley thing over Luka, obviously there was a lot of weird stuff going on there, a lot of rumors, but the common take that they drafted for fit over best pick available, which was clearly Luka. They were that's a situation where instead of trying to get the best talent possible when you're a rebuilding team like the Sacramento Kings were, they were like, oh, let's start trying to make moves to win now and trying to make a playoff push. And, OKC, we don't have the luxury of doing that right now. There's just, we can't afford to do that. We're too early. When you rush things, you make bad decisions and you make it last longer. And I think Sam Presti even said that in a press conference recently. He was like, we're trying to make this rebuild last as long as possible so it's shorter. In that when you rush things, your rebuild is ultimately going to be longer than it was if you had just taken your time. And so if it means taking 3 or 4 years to rebuild, instead of trying to make it, 2 or 3 years, and then it becomes a 6, 7, 8 year rebuild, I would rather take the 4 or 5 year route if it means we're going to be in a better position for long-term success, which is what I think Sam Presti is doing. We got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we got Josh Giddey, who, while I don't think he's necessarily a franchise cornerstone type of player, he's a very, very good player that you can keep around. He's not going to make you too good to stay in a rebuilding mode, and he's not bad enough that he's actively hurting your team and you have to try and get rid of him. He's not like a wasted draft pick. And then who knows who I know we're going to talk about who we're going to take with the second overall pick, but we're going to get a player that can be very, very, very impactful for our franchise long term. And then from there, there's no telling what the future holds. All these picks that we have, there's no telling what certain teams are going to look like in 1, 2, 3 years from now. So people just, once again, patience with Sam Presti. He's not going to start, trading everybody for picks. He's not going to trade the second overall pick for 2 future first round picks or anything like that. Like, just take it easy. Be patient. We're in good shape. We're in better shape than a lot of teams were when they were at our point in their rebuilds. We got plenty of time.
Yeah, I'm glad you make that point, because once again, Sacramento continues to be a pretty perfect analog for this, because taking it back to that 2018 draft, they had the second pick. Oklahoma City is now in that same position of where, hey, Sacramento decided that they were going to draft someone that they felt fit their team. And I guess you can look at that argument. Hey, they needed a big. They had questions about whether Luka could play with Fox, and so they prioritized that. And so this year, I think the choices are a bit slimmer since the top 3 are really only bigs, but they vary in ways that Oklahoma City at 2 should still be able to pick a little bit between fit for their team and just kind of best player, high upside. We've essentially seen Chet Holmgren be mocked to Oklahoma City at 2 pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the consensus. What are your thoughts on potentially adding Chet?
I mean, with Chet, it's a situation where I don't know how anyone can watch him throughout high school and throughout college and just not be like just fascinated with the potential. I understand his floor, quote unquote, could be fairly low,
Mm-hmm.
but the ceiling, man, like there's no telling what this guy could be in the NBA because legitimately we've never seen a prospect like this. Like there just
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been one. People make the Kevin Durant comparison. Chet is a much better defensive prospect than Kevin Durant. Um, Much taller too. I mean, people always say Kevin Durant's a 7-footer. Kevin Durant's not actually 7 feet tall. Chet Holmgren is a true 7-footer, and his ball handling ability, his defensive ability, his 3-point shooting ability. It's just I don't know how you can't look at Chet Holmgren and be like, this dude could be an absolute freak, like something we've never seen before in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And as a Thunder fan, that's hard not to want on your team. I know that with a guy like Paolo or a guy like Jabari Smith, they're more sure things. They're a bit more guaranteed. They're the known variable as far as drafting goes. They're players that have very concrete abilities, and you can see how it will translate to an NBA stage. With Chet, there's questions of how will his body hold up, how much of an impact is he actually going to be able to have on the offensive end? Will his defense truly translate to these big NBA level players? And I think those are definitely valid concerns. But once again, it's one of those situations where I don't think we can really go wrong with this pick, because the nice thing is, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but the nice thing about having a top 3 pick is all of these players are forwards,
Mm-hmm.
big men. Jabari Smith, big. Paolo, big. Chet, big. So no matter what, we need a big.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we're going to get a big. So I'm happy no matter what. I think reaction, gun to my head, I'm saying I want Chet. But if we end up getting Paolo, I'm cool with it. Jabari, I don't know. Maybe I've heard some things that I don't necessarily like from my friends who are draft people. They've kind of talked me down off the Jabari Smith ledge, so to speak. But Chet, if we can get Chet at number 2, I want Chet.
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a similar boat. I went into this kind of process, like I'm not a draft person myself, but I just from the tape, as a casual viewer, I went into it very high on Jabari. After my recent conversation with our mutual friend Zay, I am a bit lower on him, and he's definitely bringing me up on Paolo's ability, and like his upside. And then looking through a bit more of the tape on him defensively, I'd agree with Zay's assessment where, those defensive shortcomings are really a lot, like effort-based, focused-based, missing rotations, something that can potentially at least has the chance to get better with experience and more reps at the professional level. So I'm super high on Paolo now. And I think Jabari would still be a pretty solid fit in Oklahoma City. Because one of I think his flaws was pointed out that, like, hey, the guard depth at Auburn wasn't great. I don't have any context for what that guard depth at Auburn looked like because I don't watch college ball, but I know the guard depth at Oklahoma City is going to be a step up. Getting to play with SGA and Josh Giddey in the backcourt is guaranteed to get Jabari more open looks than what he was attempting in college. If he still has the reputation and if he's still that same kind of player who's like looking to take bad contested shots, that's something that should at least lessen in Oklahoma City. So I think from a fit standpoint for Jabari, like Oklahoma City might actually be his best landing point because early on the ball will be taken out of his hands. He won't be given those opportunities to just kind of isolate and a bunch of dribbles into a contested mid-range kind of look. But so what are your thoughts on maybe how he would potentially fit with the core?
It's a situation you kind of touched on where I don't watch enough college ball to really be able to sit here and give what I would consider as an educated opinion. But from what I have seen of him, I think like you said, he's going to be fine once he probably gets better guard depth around him. He has some very promising offensive skills that he's showcased, and there are things that I've seen that I'm like, okay, there's something interesting here. But do I think if you have a top 2 pick that he is the right one to go with? No, I think with a top 2 pick, you're going after like pretty high upside kind of guys, pretty guaranteed star level talents. And Jabari, it's like, could he eventually become an all-star? Totally possible. I'm not going to write him off this early. But with Paolo and with Chet, you're talking like potential perennial all-star, potentially all NBA caliber eventually at some point in their careers. It's just different right now. Paolo and Chet are kind of in their own caliber. They're in their own tier. And then Jabari, to me, just falls, a little bit below that. Not saying that Jabari is a bad player or that I'm going to be, heartbroken if we get him, but as a team with a top 2 pick, I don't think he's the choice.
Okay. Yeah, I think Zay, essentially kind of leaned that same way. I had him do pretty much a happiness scale for where he'd land on Orlando's draft decision. And for him, Chet and Paolo were at the top of that. And Jabari was like a tier below that, kind of like even a 3B, because he was super high on AJ Griffin. So that was kind of his stance on things. I do want to get into the fact that Oklahoma City has more than just that top pick. This is going to be the case for the foreseeable future, with Oklahoma City just having multiple draft selections in any given year. They also have the 12th pick, and that's from the Clippers. They have the Phoenix Suns pick, which will be like late first round. And then they also have the 34th pick. That will be a second round pick, pretty close to a first round pick. So they can even consolidate. I have a hard time seeing them trade 3 picks to somebody else, because I don't see any other team likely to take 3 rookies. But I do think there's a chance they can consolidate like 2 of those picks, move up, maybe add Lu Dort to a deal as a sweetener and try and do something. What do you see as far as draft day deals? Are you hoping something happens?
That's something I've thought about. The thing is, no one's told me anything that's really sold me on like a guaranteed home run trade that we should make. I've seen some stuff mocked up and I'm like, yeah, I guess, cool idea. Maybe it would be interesting. It's a couple of things for me. One, I don't know enough about the prospects outside of the top 5 that I'm really, really high on. Really the top 5 picks are the only ones I know much of anything about, except for I've looked at a couple mocks of players we could take at 12. So, I'm not opposed to just drafting with our 12th pick. I think when you try to do too much with draft picks, it can really backfire in the long run. I think more often than not, there's very, very good players in any given draft available at 12 or lower. I don't think this is a situation where we absolutely have to trade up. I know there are some really exciting prospects in that kind of 4 through 8 range. AJ Griffin, they've talked a lot about, but I think he'll probably end up getting snagged up, top 5. So we'd have to trade up for another top 5 pick with that 12th pick, which seems a little difficult to pull off. But like Shadon Sharp, I think is a really exciting player. Jeremy Sohan is someone that I've seen mocked at us for 12, but I've kind of seen him climbing up the draft boards. But if he was available at 12, I'd be totally fine with us taking him. if we decided to just draft outright at 12, but that's if he's even available, because I've kind of seen him creeping up lately. I don't know how to pronounce this dude's name, so I apologize if I'm butcher it, but Benedict Mathurin.
Yep, I heard of him as well.
I hope I didn't say that too wrong, but he looks like a really interesting player that could potentially be available around that 10 through 12 range. Nikola Jovic, which is hilarious that there's a lottery pick with that name. There are players that I like near that 12 pick that could potentially be available. So do we need to trade? Would it be our best idea to trade up? Maybe, but I don't think it's going to do us. I think this is a draft where there are going to be good players available at 12. So if you do trade up, cool. But if you don't, I don't think it's going to be looked back on as like, oh, they should have traded up to a top 5 through 7, 5 through 8 pick. To me, the difference between 12 and 5, 6, 7, to me doesn't seem that big. Again, that's from a perspective that I'm very much out of tune with prospect scouting and drafting and stuff like that. So don't take my word as gospel. This is just, gut reaction, completely off the cuff. So.
Yeah, I like that viewpoint too. I listen to a lot of OKC podcasts, and I try and hop in the Twitter spaces to just really get a feel for what the fans want or think should happen. And I'm curious, just kind of your thoughts on potentially trading Lu Dort, because that has been a hot button subject, because I've heard trade ideas for moving Dort in order to move up. Some people are a lot more opposed to that than others because he's such a fan favorite for Thunder fans. So just where do you stand on potentially moving Dort in this draft?
So to me, it would be a situation where you have to be getting someone that you are 100% positive is going to be better than Lu Dort. With that being said, I think there are definitely players in this draft where if you had the opportunity to move up using Lu Dort and say that 12 pick, I think you do that in a heartbeat. Some of the guys I mentioned, I think, again, this is a guy who's been flying up draft boards lately, but Shadon Sharp, Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray, these are guys who are more than likely going to be better than Lu Dort. Lu Dort has benefited greatly, and I say this, Thunder fans, please do not kill me. I absolutely love Lu Dort. He benefits a lot from being on a bad team. These numbers that he puts up, you put him on a contending team. Is Lu Dort averaging 17 points per game?
Not.
More than likely, probably not. But that doesn't mean Lu Dort's a bad player. It just means that, since he's here in OKC, this is the situation that he's in, and he's going to put up the numbers that the coach wants him to go out there, take the shots that the coach wants him to take. So I think he's been great for us. I think the intensity that he brings on defense has been great for us, kind of establishing that defensive identity, which I've loved. That's one thing that I think is super underrated from this rebuild, and something that, when you're talking about teams rebuilding, more often than not, they're going out there and they're just letting teams get literally whatever they want on the offensive end. And they're giving up tons and tons, 130, 140, 150 points a game against them. And it's just terrible for establishing a good culture. What I love about, and I know I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but what I love about the Thunder's rebuild is that we have prioritized establishing a defensive identity. We do not let teams walk into our house and drop, 130 points on us. And like you said earlier, the games that we lose, our margin of victory their margin of victory is typically not that big. We put up good fights against good teams. And I think Lu Dort has been an integral part in us establishing that defensive intensity and setting the tone on defense against these teams that, for all intents and purposes, are much more talented than we are.
Yeah, I'm totally happy you said all that, because Dort, I mean, his defensive ability has been shining through since he got to Oklahoma City. I think the point of like why I hear people suggesting potentially trading him is the fact that SGA is in the backcourt already. We believe Giddey is a backcourt player. I mean, to be decided, kind of, in my opinion. I think he could definitely play in the front court. I think he's big enough. He's like 6'9", 6'10". Like, I think there should definitely be some possessions using him as a post hub. It's a post playmaker, kind of akin to Sabonis or Bam Adebayo. But for right now, he's largely still slotted in the backcourt. And then at that point, it's like, all right, well, where are we making room for Dort? Because as a 3, he still is undersized, and for as good as he is defensively, like, you know, he's still going to give up some height on the better wings. And he'll win those matchups because of how good he is defensively, but you know, they're beating him on enough of them too. So I think the question has been pitched as, you know, trade Dort and find a more positionally versatile defender with like that size there. Even Aaron Wiggins has kind of flashed that as the 55th pick last year.
Oh, I love Aaron Wiggins.
Yeah, dude. super strong positionally, good defender. Often, like, finding him at 55 was nuts. But like,
oh my gosh,
you know, maybe he can grow and ascend into that Dort role and have Lu be a little more replaceable in that way.
Right.
So yeah, I see the argument, but like, yeah, I agree. It's going to be tough to part with Dort, and you know, maybe some of those like 5th through 8th options are enough to get it done. But it'll be interesting to see if any trades get done on draft night for Oklahoma City.
Right.
So, and I do want to get into the future outlook of the team and hopes a little bit. I think one thing I definitely kind of want to get a conversation going on about is the head coach for the Thunder, because he's been super underrated, in my opinion. Mark Daigneault, since he's gotten there, I've already seen a bunch of Thunder fans call him like the best coach that the franchise has had. Scott Brooks and Billy Donovan were 2 guys, particularly while they're with the Thunder, that got a reputation as like just kind of running things on autopilot, not necessarily making the adjustments that fans wanted. This was a bit, you know, built into the roster building of the team, of just like, they never really had the shooters and spacing to space things up, and especially after KD left, that got worse. But you know, those were guys that didn't necessarily get a lot of love for just being dynamic coaches. And I think Mark has. I think like he's shown more personality than those guys, just being like a young coach that's bonded with the roster. And I think his X's and O's are very solid. And I think he's also an element of that defensive identity that's been brought over to the franchise.
Yeah, I think I don't want to put a label on him just yet, because you can't judge. One, I'm pretty sure he's like younger than LeBron or something like that. Like, he's one of the youngest coaches in the NBA. So I don't want to put any labels on him or label his upside as a coach, but I do think there are 2 types of coaches in the NBA, and very few of them transcend this kind of distinction. And the first type is developmental coaches that are coaches for these teams, that gets them to where they need to go, and then they kind of hit a wall, and that wall could be play-in team, that wall could be playoff team, but can't quite get over the hump. And then the other type is championship coaches. Obviously, those lines get very blurred when you're working with a team that has, like, you know, a Giannis, a LeBron, players like that, players that are just good enough to defy whatever drawbacks a coach may have. But you know, with Mark, I really think Mark is a great coach for this development. The real test is going to be, you know, 3-4 years from now, when we're kind of starting to make the playoffs again and trying to get back to the promised land. It's going to be a real test of his mettle as a coach, to see what he's truly capable of. What kind of system is he going to craft? How is he going to maximize the strengths and mitigate the weaknesses of every player on the roster? And I'm really excited for that. I think he's definitely up to the task. But, Scott Brooks and Billy Donovan, I don't want to sit here and pretend that if we had a better coach during those good years, those prime years of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, I don't want to sit here and act like if we had a good coach, we're guaranteed to win a ring. But I think people do underestimate the impact of a coach, what kind of impact a coach can have on a potential championship team. Billy Donovan, he's a fine coach. He's not, I wouldn't say he's great. I wouldn't say he's bad, but I'm not going to sit here and say he's really even above average. Scott Brooks, I'd say most people would probably be pretty underwhelmed with his coaching. Mark, I think all things considered, I've been blown away by his coaching. I think the people, all the players on the team are bought into his system. I think he's on the same page as the front office, which I think is one of the most important things for any franchise, is for the coach and the front office to be on the same page. Because when the coach and the front office aren't on the same page, it trickles down to everything else. It will trickle down to the on-court product. We can look at that with the Lakers this year. The disconnect between the front office and the coach definitely impacted the on-court play, because the front office wanted one thing and the coach wanted another. And I think with OKC, they've got a great coach that can grow with the franchise, and there's something to be said for kind of building your team with your coach. That is a privilege that a lot of coaches don't get, and I think Mark Daigneault is in a really unique situation, and I'm super excited to see what he becomes.
Yeah, he's absolutely one of my favorite young coaches in the league, and that's why I think the team has a legit shot to sneak into that play-in tier, and at least as far as seeding wise, be a little closer to where the Lakers finished last year, and actually have a shot of being in that play-in tournament. I do kind of want to get your do a rapid fire, get your thoughts on players on the roster. Just because there's some names in here that I do want to touch on, but I don't necessarily want to devote an entire segment to talking about Tre Mann as much as I do like him. So let's actually start with Aaron Wiggins, since we already talked on him a little bit. Seems like you're a big Aaron Wiggins. So rapid fire thoughts on Aaron Wiggins.
I love Aaron Wiggins. I think he's going to be a good rotational player. Great pick, kind of diamond in the rough, and I think he's going to grow with this team and fit really well.
Okay, I'm super fascinated to get your answer on this one. Aleksej Pokusevski.
Oh boy. Cone, if you end up watching this, I'm sorry. He's really young, same Josh Giddey boat, where it's he's so young, it's too early to put a pin in things. I think he's got to be a better decision maker. He will eventually have to become a more efficient scorer, but we can afford to kind of mess around right now and see what he's capable of. It's not hurting anything, but I think a time will come where we have to make a decision.
Okay. Yeah. I'm right aligned with you on that. Darius Bazley.
Oh my gosh. Darius Bazley is the only player in the NBA that can look literally a top 15 player on one possession, and then the next possession he will look like he doesn't know how to play basketball. And it's infuriating, but also electric at the same time. So I have a very love-hate relationship with Darius Bazley.
I'm not letting go of my Bazley stock. I think he could be such a solid two-way player for a team. I think he could be a legit small ball 5 option if with a little more strength. So I'm a huge Bazley fan. So I wanted to get your thoughts on him. Tre Mann.
I love Tre Mann. I think he's going to be looked at as one of the biggest steals of the draft. I think he is such an exciting player, amazing shot creator. I'd argue there's a case that he was the best just strictly shot creator of any rookie outside of maybe Jalen Green and maybe Cam Thomas. But I mean, Tre Mann, oh my gosh, I don't know how you can't watch him and just not get excited, because you talk about bag, offensive bag, that dude's bag is so deep and it is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm a believer in his development, because he started the year rough. They sent him down to the G League. He came back and he was a different player. The confidence was there with him. That game, I think it was the game against the Lakers. He dunked on Wayne Ellington, And I think that completely changed his season. Like his confidence from that point was insane. So such a huge Trey Mann guy. Jeremiah Robinson Earl.
He's kind of someone who can occasionally blend into the background and things. I think he's a good player. I don't really know if he is a long-term, like if you're talking a eventual playoff 8-man rotation. I don't know how he's going to fit down the road, but again, it's one of those situations where have we seen enough to put a cap on him? I think he's an interesting player, 35% from three this year as a center. He was a little bit undersized. Really, I don't have a true assessment. It's just one of those situations where, he could be something. We'll just kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah, JRE is a player, like he came into the league like ready to be a role player, and like he's good at those role player things. He's young enough. We'll see how he builds upon it. So I think he has the chance to legitimately be one of the better role players in the league since he came in with such a high floor as a player. Because defender, he has a pick and pop game that's already starting to show up, and he's a intuitive passer with some nice feel. So I'm a fan.
He also went to Villanova, and I will always preach the importance of Villanova guys. Like Villanova guys, more often than not, like Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson, Villanova guys become good in the NBA. You just got to, sometimes it takes some time.
True. Yeah, they know what to do. Josh Hart, I believe, is another Villanova guy. So they have a lot of like great, solid NBA players that are in the league right now, which inspires confidence in what JRE is going to become. I'm trying to take a look through the roster and see if there's anyone else that I missed. I guess we can go super rapid fire on these ones. Kenrich Williams.
I like Kenny. I know we're gonna end up trading him eventually just because he's so sought after by so many teams.
Okay, this guy, like Lindy Waters.
Oh, fun fact. Actually, my grandma is friends with Lindy Waters' dad, so that's funny. They were texting me. My grandma was texting me when he first got his. He played against Trae Young, and obviously Trae Young played at college in Oklahoma, and she was like, "Hey, Lindy Waters is playing," and I was like, "She was like, how's he doing?" I was like, "I don't think he's doing very good, but it's cool that he's playing." Yeah. Interesting player. I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't. Could be something. Just kind of take a flyer on. He's shown some flashes of good stuff, but you don't really know. Just yet.
I really only brought him up because, like, as a player you're taking a flyer on, he's definitely got a torch from three, it seems. So, shooting is a premium quality skill in the NBA. So, like, we could see him stick around in the league just as like a Garrison Matthews type at the very least. So, was worth at least a mention.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the last player who is also likely going to be traded out, if not this offseason by the end of the year, Derek Favors.
Yeah. Derek Favors, shout out to Derek Favors, man. Just making the most of for a veteran player like that, making the most of a quote unquote bad situation. I appreciate guys like that. Al Horford, Chris Paul. I really appreciate guys like that come to our franchise and come to our city and work with these young guys and try to make them better. And I think there's a lot of importance to that. And Derek Favors accepting his player option at age 30. The fact that he did that not only speaks to the type of person that he is, I think it speaks a lot to the type of organization that OKC is. The fact that a 30-year-old player who could probably get a long-term contract from another team, maybe not for as much, but a long-term contract worth more than just $10 million. The fact that Derek Favors was like, I'll stick around for another year. I think that speaks volumes to the type of person he is and the type of organization that OKC is. And it's much appreciated, even though on court, he's a fine player, but he's not going to be winning you any championships anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the team that lands him, because we've already seen Oklahoma City become like this hyperbolic time chamber for veterans.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Chris Paul almost he went there and left and almost ends up winning a championship. We'll see if Al Horford can get it done this season. But clearly Kemba Walker might have made a mistake by not at least spending half a season in Oklahoma City to rehab and recover a little bit, because that might have upped his value. So I do want to just finish this out on, letting you take the stage once more, promo anything that you got coming. Like I've already said, you're the best, up and coming NBA YouTuber that's on the platform. You do fantastic work. So if anyone's not already subscribed and following and supporting your work, they need to go ahead and do that right away. I'll let you take the floor and, promo any of your other social media platforms that you're on, and videos and projects that you've got in the works.
Yeah. So, obviously on YouTube, AlexHoops, I'm posting a lot of stuff over there. The playoffs, obviously there's only so much I can talk about, but got some stuff coming up for the rest of the conference finals. Got some more stuff coming up for the finals. And then I have tons and tons of stuff planned for the off season. Going to be doing a lot of series covering rebuilding teams and talking about kind of the next steps for them, taking a look at some of the teams that disappointed in the playoffs, kind of taking a look at what's next for them. Also have a potential stream in the works right now. So stay tuned for that. If that's something you're interested in, I can't give away too many details right now, but be on the lookout for that. And if you want to get updated on all of my content, just follow me on Twitter at AlexHoops. I'm tweeting all the time, probably a little bit too much. So I'm over there. And man, I really appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation. Yeah. I think you're doing great work. Keep it up. I think you're definitely totally on the right track.
Yeah, and I appreciate that coming from someone who puts out work at the quality and consistency that you do. As I've already let you know, I've already kind of fanboyed to you earlier. You're literally one of my favorite content creators on the platform. Alex is pushing me to make better content, and it's a win-win for all of us because we're getting such fantastic, informative stuff from you. You do great work with film, and I think you really see the game well. You're incredibly smart. So, like I said, I'm super happy to have had you on the show, man.
I appreciate it. Pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, but that's all I have for you in this one today on the Layup Line. I appreciate everyone who's still listening and supporting. Make sure to go like this video. Make sure to go support Alex on all platforms that he's on. Go check out the Orlando Magic video I did the other day with Zay. We went over the Magic, their options with the first overall pick, and just kind of the context of the franchise over the past 10 years and what it's like to be having been an Orlando Magic fan. Thanks again for watching once more, and enjoy the rest of your day.